Pincer Movement. In 216 BC, on one day, 70,000 Roman soldiers were destroyed. But this was not a massacre. This was a tactical masterpiece. Hannibal, with a half-sized army, trapped the greatest army in the world in a unique trap. The Battle of Cannae, which took place between Carthage and Rome, is recognized as an unparalleled masterpiece of the pincer attack strategy in military history, in which Hannibal Barca managed, with a smaller army, to completely destroy the massive Roman forces. In this battle, Hannibal arranged his infantry in the center in a convex crescent shape toward the Romans, while he placed his strongest cavalry and trained infantry on the two flanks. When the battle began, the Roman legions charged the center of the Carthaginian army with full force, and according to Hannibal's plan, his center slowly began to retreat, to lure the enemy deep into the trap. This deliberate withdrawal caused the Roman formation to break from a linear shape and compress into a narrow space. Meanwhile, Hannibal's cavalry on the flanks managed to defeat the Roman cavalry and then circle behind the main Roman army. At that moment, the powerful arms of the Carthaginian army from the left and right began to close like the two blades of a pair of shears. With the cavalry joining from behind and infantry from both sides, the Roman army was completely encircled in a deadly circle, and due to the high density, the Roman soldiers didn't even have enough space to swing their swords. This complete pincer maneuver caused nearly 50 to 70,000 Roman soldiers to be killed in one day. In this battle, the attacker, using the pincer movement, not only neutralized the enemy's numerical superiority, but also, by using the battlefield and precise timing, trapped the entire enemy army in an absolute encirclement and destroyed it. Fabian Strategy. In 217 BC, after two heavy defeats, the Romans realized they could not defeat Hannibal in a direct battle, but a Roman general made a strange decision. Instead of fighting, he chose to retreat, and this retreat became the most ingenious military tactic in history. After Hannibal achieved devastating victories in the battles of Trebia and Lake Trasimene, Fabius realized that defeating him in a face-to-face battle was impossible. He avoided direct engagement. He stationed his forces in hilly regions to neutralize the Carthaginian cavalry advantage, and he ordered villagers to burn their crops and take refuge in fortified towns so Hannibal could not gather supplies. Despite its military success, this strategy was initially unpopular among the Romans because they were accustomed to direct battles and blamed Fabius for his delays. After his dismissal and Rome's disastrous defeat at the Battle of Cannae, the Roman Senate realized that Fabius' method was the only practical way to drive Hannibal out of Italy. In this method, the defending army, through small raids and scattered skirmishes, tries to disrupt enemy logistics, inflict gradual losses on them, and destroy the morale of the attacking forces. Using this strategy usually indicates that time favors the defender because he fights on or near his own soil, while the enemy is far from home and struggles with long supply lines and high costs. The name of this strategy comes from Quintus Fabius Maximus, dictator of the Roman Republic, who was tasked with defeating Hannibal, the great Carthaginian general during the Second Punic War. Throughout history, other examples of this strategy have been seen. Robert Bruce's campaigns in Scotland, Bertrand du Guesclin's actions in the 100 Years' War against England, and George Washington during the American Revolution, who was called the American Fabius for using the same tactic to wear down the British army. Flanking maneuver. In 490 BC, Miltiades, with a simple move, was able to defeat the numerous Persian army. But what was the secret of his success? Not a direct attack, but an attack from where no one expected it. The flanking maneuver has its roots in the tactics of the Battle of Marathon in 490 BC, in which forces, instead of directly attacking the center and front line of the enemy, attack the sides or flanks of the opposing army to gain a superior position. In this method, which from ancient times to the present day, is recognized as one of the fundamental principles of warfare, the focus is on attacking the weakest part of the enemy's defensive formation, because the combat power of any army is usually concentrated in its front line, and the flanks have the least defensive strength. Miltiades, using this same logic, was able to defeat the numerous Persian army by strengthening his flanks. In the pre-modern era, cavalry, due to its speed and high maneuverability, was the main tool for executing this maneuver, while heavy infantry was tasked with holding the enemy center in place, so that the flanking maneuver could be carried out successfully. With the arrival of the 20th century, tanks and armored vehicles replaced horses, and in major wars such as the Battle of France in 1940, the Germans, using the speed of their war machines, were able to outflank and surprise the Allied armies. Commanders, to defend against this maneuver, usually try to anchor their flanks to natural features such as mountains, lakes, or forests, or use reserve forces on the flanks to prevent the enemy from encircling the army. This strategy was also used in World War II. The Allies, by attacking Nazi Germany from several different directions, carried out a flanking maneuver on a strategic level that led to a two-front war and the final collapse of the enemy. Feigned Retreat. In the history of war, some retreats only appear to be defeats. Feigned Retreat, rooted in Sun Tzu's recommendations in the art of war around 500 BC, is one of the most difficult and sensitive military tactics, in which a military force pretends to flee or be defeated to lure the enemy into pursuit and place them in a vulnerable position. This strategy, which requires extremely disciplined soldiers, begins with an initial engagement and a display of weakness. At first, the two armies clash. Your army, intending to deceive, must fight as if it were weaker. This stage is very delicate. Soldiers must fight enough for the enemy to believe a real battle is underway, while simultaneously showing signs of fear or disorder. At a critical moment, your army suddenly begins to retreat. This retreat must not be too orderly, because the enemy will become suspicious, and it must not be too chaotic, because it could turn into a real rout. At this stage, the enemy believes they have won, and the instinct to pursue the fleeing enemy awakens in them. The enemy, tempted by a quick victory, abandons their fortifications and chases after your army. In this pursuit, the enemy's formation collapses. The faster soldiers move ahead, and the slower soldiers fall behind. The enemy has now transformed from a compact, powerful force into a long, disorganized line. When the enemy reaches your intended point, your army suddenly halts. In an instant, your soldiers turn back and attack the enemy, who has lost order and is exhausted. Usually at this moment, your hidden cavalry also strikes the enemy from the flanks, finishing the job. Blitzkrieg. In September 1939, the sound of bombers was the prelude to a military revolution. Germany proved that fear alone could defeat the enemy before even a single shot was fired. Blitzkrieg warfare, which has its roots in German military doctrines of 1935, is a combined arms method of warfare that, by concentrating armored forces, motorized infantry, artillery, and close air support, emphasizes speed and surprise to shatter enemy defensive lines. Commanders select the weakest or most sensitive point of enemy lines to concentrate all their forces. In the next stage, heavy aerial and artillery attacks are employed to destroy communications and create terror. As seen in 1940 during the Battle of Stuka bombers, with their terrifying sirens, broke the defenders' morale. Now it is time for the rapid penetration of armored forces, in which tanks swiftly pass through the created breach, and without engaging strongpoints, penetrate deep into enemy territory. In the next stage, armored forces, after penetrating, turn toward the enemy's rear and encircle them, to cut off their connection with command centers, exactly like what happened in June 1941 during Operation Barbarossa and the encirclement of Red Army forces in Minsk and Smolensk. Finally, the infantry, advancing behind the tanks, destroys or captures the encircled and disoriented enemy forces. The success of this tactic between 1939 and 1941 in Belgium, the Netherlands, and France showed that combining modern technology with high operational speed could bring even the most powerful classical armies to their knees before they had a chance to mobilize. Scorched Earth. Sometimes, to defeat the enemy, you must first sacrifice your own land. This is the dark logic of the Scorched Earth strategy. The Scorched Earth strategy, which has its roots in ancient events, and one of its earliest recorded examples dates back to the 6th century BC and the battles of the Scythians against Darius the Great. This tactic, unlike offensive strategies, is a defensive and attritional method. The execution of this strategy from beginning to end consists of 4 main stages. First, the defending forces, recognizing the enemy's superiority, instead of standing their ground at the borders, begin retreating into the depth of their own territory to draw the enemy away from its supply lines. In the next stage, soldiers and even civilians are required to burn all agricultural products, poison or block water wells, kill livestock, and destroy warehouses and homes, so that nothing is left for the enemy. In the third stage, the enemy enters the occupied regions, but is confronted with a dead land. At this point, just as happened in 1812 during Napoleon's invasion of Russia, the invading army, due to hunger and lack of shelter against the severe cold, loses a large part of its strength. In the fourth stage, when the enemy has reached its weakest point due to famine and disease, the defending forces, who had moved their supplies to more distant areas, return and deliver the final blow to the exhausted and retreating enemy army. This tactic has repeatedly changed the fate of wars throughout history, from Russia against the Nazi army in 1941, which by destroying bridges and factories prevented Germany's rapid advance, to the resistance of the Vietnamese against the occupiers, who by burning fields left the enemy helpless. Siege warfare. Some wars are won by bullets, others by hunger. The story of siege warfare is the story of victory through waiting and suffering, where the greatest weapon is patience and endurance. Siege warfare, whose origins date back to millennia before Christ, and the ancient walls of Jericho, is a type of military strategy that is based on cutting off communication and supply routes of a city or military fortress to force it into surrender. Unlike open field battles where speed and movement dominate, a siege is a battle of patience and attrition. The execution of this strategy from beginning to end consists of 4 strategic stages. In the first stage, the attacking army occupies the area surrounding the city or fortress and blocks all entry and exit routes. Attackers usually construct 2 lines of defense, one facing the city to prevent the defenders from breaking out, and another facing outward to prevent the arrival of external reinforcements. The second stage is called bombardment and destruction of infrastructure, in ancient times using catapults and in the modern era with heavy artillery. The city walls are targeted. The goal is to destroy water sources, food stockpiles, and create terror among civilians. In the third stage, attackers begin digging tunnels beneath the walls to collapse them, or use siege towers to try to reach the top of the fortifications, as seen in the famous Siege of Jerusalem in 70 AD or Constantinople in 1453. In the fourth stage, when famine, disease, and the destruction of walls reach their peak, the defenders either surrender to survive, or the attackers storm into the city and bring the battle to an end. This tactic has evolved throughout history, from the long sieges of Alexander the Great that lasted for months, to modern sieges like Stalingrad in 1942, which became one of the deadliest events in human history. Divide and rule. To defeat a great enemy, you do not always need a great army. Sometimes it is enough to make them fight themselves. The divide and rule strategy has deep historical roots in political and military doctrines. It is a method of maintaining power by breaking large and unified enemy structures into smaller groups that are hostile toward one another. This tactic is used not only on the battlefield, but also widely in the management of occupied territories and colonial policies. Philip II, King of Macedon, and later the Roman Empire were pioneers of this method. The execution of this strategy from beginning to end consists of 4 strategic stages. In the first stage, the ruler or attacking commander begins a careful study of the target society or army. The goal is to understand which groups have hidden conflicts with each other, and how these differences can be used to create confrontation. In the second stage, through propaganda or granting special privileges to a specific group, feelings of jealousy and distrust among the groups are intensified. For example, the British Empire in the 19th and 20th centuries in India, by temporarily supporting one religious group against another, prevented the formation of a unified national front against colonial rule. In the third stage, after the groups have begun fighting each other, the attacking central power plays the role of mediator or patron. It assists weaker groups in fighting against stronger ones. This causes both sides to become dependent on the support of the central power for their survival, and prevents them from uniting against it. This is the same method the Romans used to control the Germanic tribes. The fourth stage is the consolidation of domination and rule. The central power imposes its authority without the need for heavy battles. This tactic throughout history, from the conquests of Napoleon to the colonization of Africa and Asia, has proven that to control a large population, a large army is not necessarily required. Rather, it is enough to turn their unity into conflict. If you'd like to see more stories like this, make sure to follow the channel and share your suggestions for future videos in the comments section.